I don't think there is any movie studio I care about more than this one. Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and over the last couple of months, I've been preparing for a video that you guys voted on pretty much 2 months ago. So today, I'm going to be finally going ahead and ranking all 28 Pixar films, from the worst to the best. An important reminder that this list is not the definitive Pixar list. It's not based on reviews. It's not based on anyone else other than me. This is just my own personal list and my own personal opinions. It is totally okay for you to have your own opinions. And if you want to share those opinions, leave some comments down below and maybe we can get a conversation going. But without further ado, let's hop in to the ranking. At number 28, at the very bottom of the list, I have Lightyear. There is no Pixar film that I think I actively disliked more than Lightyear. When I look at the Toy Story franchise, the reason why Buzz Lightyear is an interesting character in those movies is because he's a parody character. He is meant to parody Star Wars, Star Trek, and all those sci fi adventure movies. But the second you make a movie that's meant to be the movie that the toy is based on, it loses all that idea because now there has to be a serious version of that character. Oh, there's now a serious version of Zurg being Buzz's father. There's now a serious version of Buzz Lightyear that's not even voiced by Tim Allen. So, and Lightyear, when it comes to the overall package, I didn't really like much about the movie. I think many of the characters, especially the side characters, were very unlikable and sometimes annoying. Buzz Lightyear kind of felt like an annoying character. Zurg is completely butchered from the original Toy Story films, and the story itself just is so weird. It's about time travel and space, and it just makes no sense when you look at the package as a whole. So realistically, I have to put this movie last because I just don't think there was any other movie in the entire Pixar catalog I actively dislike more than Lightyear. So it belongs here in the bottom slot. At number 27, I have Turning Red. Now, I am very aware that the Turning Red story is not designed for someone like me, as if you were a mother or a daughter who went through very similar things, maybe this movie would have connected with you more. But for me personally, I did not really like this. I didn't really connect with this movie. In fact, I think this is one of the only Pixar movies that the first time I watched it, I I actually fell asleep. Like I was really bored throughout most of the movie. I will give it some credit. I think the characters are likable in a lot of ways. There's some good music, and there are actually some, at times, some really decent story development points. But as a whole, I just find this movie really, really boring. I never really get invested in the relationship between the mother and the daughter, and so much else about this movie just doesn't work for me. Like you got the Four Town Band, which kind of just feels like just tacked on and doesn't really do anything for the plot. I think that the whole premise of the girl turning into a red panda is kind of interesting, and I think it could be good. The problem is it's just put in a context that makes it kind of uninteresting to someone of my background, we'll say. So as a result, I've had to place it kind of low on the list, but I put it above Lightyear because at least I don't actively dislike Turning Red like I do Lightyear. At number 26, I have Brave. Now, Brave is one of those movies that I think kind of falls in the same category as Turning Red, where this movie is not made for me. It's another movie about a mother connecting with a daughter, which is just something I don't really ever get invested in. And I think some other parts about it are kind of wacky, I should say. I think Mordu is kind of a villain that didn't need to be in the movie. I think you could have just made the movie without Mordu, and most of the story doesn't even change. He just is almost there as like a cautionary tale, and then he just shows up in the finale. I think that this movie also didn't really know what kind of identity it wanted to have, as some of the jokes are really bad. And when you look at the troubled history of the movie, you also see that kind of the director didn't even understand what the story is, which comes off in the final product. So I've had to put Brave really low on the list for a lot of different reasons, but I will give Brave this. It's not boring, so at least it makes it out of the bottom two. At number 25, I have The Good Dinosaur. Now, this movie has been berated by so many Pixar fans as being the worst in the franchise. When I watch Good Dinosaur now, I think I more see it as kind of a movie that was wasted potential. As the movie has this really cool premise of we have cavemen existing at the same time as dinosaurs and kind of learning from one another as dinosaurs have evolved into making like farmland and stuff like that. The movie doesn't do anything interesting with that. It just makes the human a dog and the dinosaur kind of just unlikable for a lot of the film. So much of the other parts of this movie just think I think the dad's death is just kind of forced on the plot. It doesn't really feel like it does anything. This movie feels really episodic at times where we go to one location and we talk to this pet collector, and then all of a sudden we're with these T-Rexes. Then we bring back a pterodactyl from another plot line for the finale. This movie just feels like a conjumbled mess of it feels like multiple episodes of a TV show that got strung together. But the same argument I keep making about other of these films, it makes it out of the bottom three because at least it's not boring. So I do put it higher than most people do, but I still think the movie could have had a little more time in the writer's room to kind of more iron out some of those little creases of it. But also the animation is also pretty. So there's some couple points about Good Dinosaur that do also make it a little higher than the other films I've mentioned. At number 24 is Incredibles 2. This movie is just really big of a disappointment for me, as I remember we begged Pixar for like 15 years to release this movie, and they finally got around to making an Incredibles 2, but then they lost a year of production because Toy Story 4 got pushed back, so Incredibles 2 lost an entire year of production. And it shows. This movie feels like such a first draft of the script that just makes it kind of annoying. Everything that happens involving Bob and the kids just kind of feels unnecessary filler, as almost nothing that happens at the Parr household when it comes to that side of the story really results in the story. It kind of just gets dropped because the second we enter the finale, Tony is completely forgotten, Dash's math is completely forgotten. The only thing that carries over is the Jack Jack stuff, which just feels like okay. And then when we return over to the Helen stuff, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas in that kind of side of the story, and I think Screenslaver is an interesting villain. And then it's revealed he's a twist villain and he's just a mouthpiece for Evelyn, which kind of ruins that entire plotline for me because I just don't think Evelyn's that interesting of a villain. She doesn't have any of the interesting ideals that made Syndrome great, and at the same time, her twist reveal is so obvious that it kind of just makes the movie feel like it's too predictable. Because, well, when you look at the movie, if there were only two characters that the twist villain could have realistically been, and making Bob Odenkirk the villain is just so obvious that even Disney wouldn't do it. So really there was only one candidate, and she just doesn't add anything to the story because when she gets revealed, she kind of just doesn't really do anything interesting. So I've had to knock Incredibles 2 down really, really badly because I think the movie had a chance to be really great, and you're going to see where the original Incredibles ranks on this list. But as a result, Incredibles 2 really kind of missed the ball about what made the first film great, and it ends up really low on this list. At number 23, I have A Bug's Life. Now, I have never been a fan of A Bug's Life. In fact, when I was younger, this used to be the movie I threw on to go to sleep because I did not enjoy this story whatsoever. Looking back on it now, this movie is definitely not as bad as I used to think it was. It's still not great, though. I think the story, of Flick hiring the circus bugs and then thinking they're warrior bugs, and he finds out they're not, and then he does the liar reveal storyline. It just doesn't. It feels really contrived. Like they really stretch really hard to make you think that okay, Flick accidentally hires these circus bugs, which just okay. The only thing that really saves this movie from being in last place is because of the villain. I think Hopper is one of the best Pixar villains as he has a lot of really interesting ideas. His voice actor nails it. He has some great ideals. You got some great scenes with him, and his villain death is actually really crazy. The fact that I can't even believe they got away with it. But but Hopper is not enough to carry the entire movie. It carries it out of the bottom 5, but it doesn't carry it much higher than spot 23. So, sorry, A Bug's Life. At number 22, I have Cars 2. Now, put down your pitchforks and your angry comments for me not putting this in last place. The one thing that Cars 2 is not is boring. Yes, it is a bad movie for a lot of cases, as they promoted our side joke character in the form of Mater to main character, which means that he has too many jokes, which kind of makes him less of a funny character. They have these spy cars that are really bad. Racing feels like a forced plot line. And it just feels like this movie didn't really know what it wanted to be. But I will give it this. Unlike the other films below it, this film is not boring. I love Cars 2. Every time I turn it on, I love watching Cars 2, and that is saying something, as for how bad of a movie it is an enjoyable ride. So I realistically can't put it below any of the other movies that I actively probably would not turn on if I had them all sitting in front of me. So there's a reason why Cars 2 is not in last place. And I've already mentioned some of the other things about this movie that kind of don't make it go any higher, but from this point on, Cars 2 is kind of the midline of what I think bad Pixar movies kind of is. And going forward, I think everything else on this list is at least a solid, maybe 4 or 5 out of 10. So at number 21, I have Elemental, and this movie is kind of in that weird category where I actually enjoyed a decent portion of it. I think discovering this whole elemental city is a really fun concept. There's a lot of really interesting ideas thrown in there with things like immigration and racial stereotypes, that kind of classic West Side Story, kids from different sides of the track fall in love. It's got all that stuff you like. The thing is, this movie being kind of feeling like West Side Story means that you basically know the entire plot going in, as you know the characters are going to fall in love, their parents are going to find out, they're going to break them up, they're going to come back together, and they're going to end up together. It's the classic formula for basically every kind of West Side Story inspired plot. But I do like this. I do think this one has some special style to it and has a lot of interesting ideas to throw in to make the world kind of interesting. I just think that the movie being really predictable brings it down for me because I feel like when I even watched it on my first watch through for this video for last year and then rewatching it for this video, I actually debated not watching it for this movie because I basically remembered everything that happens. Even when I remember watching the first time, I feel like I was sitting there and I'm like, all right, the next scene is probably going to be this. Okay, cool, it's that. Oh, the next scene is going to be the breakup. Oh, yep, there's the breakup. So yeah, I think this movie is perfectly surpassable as an animated film, but it definitely does not have any of the things that really cement it as a Pixar film, which is why it can't really go too much higher than 21. At number 20, we have Toy Story 4. Now, this is a movie that had no reason to exist, as Toy Story 3 is such a perfect ending to the Toy Story trilogy that Toy Story 4 just feels like unnecessary filler to make more money, which makes Toy Story 5 pretty much the pinnacle of that. But we're not talking about Toy Story 5, we're talking about Toy Story 4. And I think this movie had some fun ideas placed into it. I think giving Woody this kind of new arc of now that he's not being played by with Bonnie, what is his new path? Which I think is funny. They bring Bo back, who's a really fun character in this movie. You got some of the other characters like the Key and Peele Bunny and Ducky, and you got some other characters that are really fun in there. Gabby is a really interesting character. Duke Kaboom. There's a lot of interesting parts of this movie. I think some of the other things about this movie though is that they promoted the new characters and kind of left the other characters in the dust. Buzz Lightyear is given nothing to do in this movie, and his inner voice thing is kind of stupid. All the other toys just sit in a van for the rest of this movie. And I think I've kind of come around on Forky. He's kind of annoying. So I think Toy Story 4 is kind of a perfect package of it has a really good concept on paper. The execution is a little weak though. And as a result, I can't really put it too much higher than number 20, but I will give it this. It is a decent enough movie, and I'm totally expecting Toy Story 5 to be below it on this ranking video when I do it in like 5 years again. At number 19, I have Cars 3, or The Real Cars 2. I think this movie is really a lot better, is leagues better than Cars 2, mainly just because it actually feels like a Cars 2, as it brings back the racing from the first movie, kind of talks about Doc's legacy, which is fun, and kind of carries on this character of Lightning McQueen in a really good way. This story is kind of based on, that classic Rocky plot line where you got the underdog who comes in, beats the main character, and the main character has to train for the rest of this movie to be able to beat them. Instead, this movie kind of takes the route of instead of Lightning being the one who beats Jackson Storm, it's Cruz. But other than that, I think there's some good points in this movie. I think all the stuff involving Doc is a lot of fun. All the backstory we get and how Doc was really proud of Lightning is fun, and how he carries that over to Cruz. I think the last race is really interesting, and there's a lot of really good moments in this movie. A lot of the downgrades for it is mainly coming from the villain. He just kind of is the worst version of Chick Hicks, so there's not a lot of enjoy from Jackson Storm. Sterling is kind of a kind of angryable character, although he's kind of like a secondary villain. You got some sequences here that aren't great. I think the Fireball Beach sequence goes on a little too long, And the training montage as well kind of is a little tacked on. It kind of doesn't feel like it fits the story too well. But I will digress that this movie is really, really good. It just has some pacing issues here and there. And that's why it ends up at number 19. At number 18, I have Monsters University. This is a movie that I've actually started to enjoy really more as I've gotten older, especially now that I've gone to college myself and started. I really like the vibe that this movie has. Is it really does feel like a college movie. You know, you got the characters going to college, joining frats, failing classes. You know, it's all the shebang that you get at a normal college. And there's a lot of great moments about this movie. Like I love Mike's arc so much times in movies, you have the main character who has a goal, they work towards that goal for the entire movie, and they get the goal at the end. This movie flips on its head though, because Mike never becomes a scarer, which you obviously know if you've seen Monsters Inc. But going into this, you're interested to see how that works out. But the thing about this movie is that they make it clear that even though Mike can't be a scarer, that doesn't mean that he's not good. He found another lens to be a scare through by coaching Sully and the rest of the Uzmas. And it's really interesting to see that arc. The lake scene where Mike and Sully truly bond, it might be my favorite sequence in any Pixar movie. It's so beautiful. But then you have on the flip side the rest of the movie. There are some points in this movie where I really just kind of am in awe. I think that there's some really interesting bad pacing issues, especially at the start of the scare games. I think once we get to the Monsters Inc. Sequence where Mike kind of flips and becomes more of a better character, the movie becomes really fun. Before that, when he's kind of just this unlikable jerk, kind of makes the movie a little for me. I think that Randall's turn to the dark side, I wanted to see more of that. In fact, that's what I was hoping to get out of this movie, which I kind of got, but kind of weak. And I think the ending also is a little interesting. But I think this movie as a package is kind of a perfect middle of the road for Pixar, as it's got a lot of things I love about it, and then and then some things that I hate about it, which also kind of even each other out. So that's why Monsters University kind of becomes the middle of the list for me, and that's really all I have to say about it. At number 17, I have Luca. Now, this is a movie that I found myself enjoying really more and more as time goes on. I think there's a lot of interesting things. The characters are all pretty likable. The whole plot line I think really works. And there's a lot of really interesting things about this movie that I really, really do enjoy. The reason why it doesn't end up really higher for me is mainly just because everything going past Luca is a Pixar movie that I feel is just incredible. In fact, Luca is basically when we hit our threshold of when we go from like pretty much movies that still have like pretty flawed Pixar films to basically masterpieces with one or two flaws here and there. So Luca kind of hits that middle of the road. But Luca is still an amazing movie and should not be discredited. If you did not get the chance to see Luca, I totally would recommend it, as it's a really good kind of movie about how we explore this Italian town. We have this really fun race sequence. The sea monster plot is really fun. And it just is a perfect package that kind of fits the perfect bill of like what I would consider a very middle of the roads Pixar film. At number 16, I have Finding Dory. Now, when it comes to a Finding Dory sequel, or when it comes to the Finding Dory sequel, I've always seen the complaint that kind of the similar vein as Cars 2, we promote our joke side character, our joke comic relief character to front runner, which kind of loses the things that make that character interesting. This movie, I think, is the opposite of that. We promote Dory to main character, and it actually works. Dory's a really good character to be at the forefront. And we get to learn about her backstory, kind of all the things about her. We get to explore the Marine Life Institute and get to meet some really fun animals like Destiny and Hank. And there's some really great moments throughout the movie. But then there's those couple flaws. I think because of promoting Dory, Nemo and Marlin are kind of given nothing to do for a majority of the runtime. And there also is that really kind of awkward choice of plot where how Dory remembers the exact memory she needs to forward the plot. And I also have to completely draw the line at that finale. Like I can accept certain things like fish being able to have their own school systems and traffic lights and being able to traverse the entire ocean in like a couple days. But driving a truck, that's where I gotta draw the line. That is just, I can't suspend my disbelief that much. Sorry, Pixar. But those weaknesses are kind of less and less as I watch the movie. I really just enjoy the time. I love exploring the Marine Life Institute, getting to know a ton of things about it, and there's a lot of really good points in Finding Dory. But it just can't go very higher because those flaws kind of bring down the positives for me. So It can't really make too much higher than number 16. At number 15, I have Onward. I think this movie's dropped a little bit for me in recent years as I've kind of gone to kind of see the flaws that this movie in it has. As I think I really enjoy some of the positives of this movie, like the whole D&D kind of analogy, which is fun. The magic is really interesting. I really just enjoy Ian and Barley as characters. I think they're really fun characters. And the adventure they go on is also pretty interesting, having a lot of different aspects to it, and also the foreshadowing of things like the gelatinous cube and stuff. There's a lot of fun points about Onward. I think what this movie fails is kind of when we get into the back half, as the movie kind of tries to switch in the back half to kind of be more of a um Barley was more of Ian's dad than he realized, but there's nothing that builds up to that. It just is kind of something that gets tacked on at the very end, and it feels like it comes out of nowhere. So that's kind of a problem where I feel like this movie fails, as it kind of feels like it pushes its message to the back and then just brings it out for the third act, which is okay, especially because most of the flashbacks for that sequence are things we've never seen before. And I think I also just never really get truly connected with the dad, and I think there's just some other awkward moments here and there. So but I think this movie still is really fun, as it kind of talks about this character who kind of is a shy character, wasn't really great at driving, had trouble inviting people to parties. It's something I can connect with. But the good and the bad kind of even each other out and bring each other down, which brings Onward far down than where it was from last time. So sorry, Onward, I kind of have to put you lower. At number 14, I have Soul. This is a movie that I was generally surprised of when I first watched it, as it's a really interesting journey of we get to go into the afterlife and we get to see, well, also the before you're born kind of place, which is fun. I think 22 and Joe are really fun characters. The music is a great addition to the story. I think the pacing actually is really good across the entire film, and I even think that there's some interesting moments here and there that also weigh each other out. As I think some of the stuff on Earth is really interesting, and they have some fun ideas of Joe kind of learning about how he kind of has a good life already. You got 22's whole arc, you even have some things here and there. The film also kind of struggles with things like villain. I just don't think Terry's that great of a villain. He kind of is missing from the entire beginning of the film. He has one goal in the middle, and then he just disappears for the back half, and it just kind of feels like the movie put a villain in for no reason in places. I think some of the ideas, like the humor they pull with Joe and 22 when they switch bodies, is kind of weird and annoying. And I think that there's also a couple of moments here and there that could have cut. But I think that overall, this is a really good package of a film and deserves so much praise because it really is that good of a Pixar film. So, Soul, you make it to number 14. At number 13, I have Toy Story. This movie is always been one of my favorites. I love the characters in it. They almost all are pretty good people. And the arc of this first movie is also really fun, about Woody kind of learning his kind of jealousy is bad and stuff. It's really fun. And Sid is a really cool villain. I think he's really good, especially in the back half where we're spending time at his house is really interesting. And I just think this movie's also hilarious. There's so many jokes in this movie I still laugh at to this very day. And it makes the movie just so much better. Where this movie kind of falls for me is I think that this being the first Pixar movie, they hadn't really figured out that mold yet for what they wanted to fit into these Pixar movies. So this one feels like it kind of lacks, as I think pacing wise, I think it takes us a little while to get moving in the plot. And also, I feel like the pacing kind of halts when we're at Sid's for a little bit. And I think that also parts of the movie, like Woody gets annoying at a couple times and a couple moments here and there like that. But this movie is still really, really good. And if you haven't seen it in a couple years, maybe you should break it out because it still is that good. At number 12, I have Coco. This movie is one that I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did when I first saw it, as it's this movie about Mexican culture, and we go into the afterlife and kind of get to see this whole world, the music, I think, but all of that ended up surprising me with how good it is. The music is really interesting. We got some really fun characters. Miguel and Hector are both really cool. You got some great visuals of the afterlife that we get to see. And the story itself is actually really good. Ernesto, I think, is one of the only Disney villains, twist villains, I should say, that are actually good. As unlike other twist villains, where you have things where they either flip on a dime or they've been like meticulously planning out everything the character's ever gone through. Ernesto just did one bad thing years ago that ended up setting off a chain reaction that basically set Miguel down a path that he didn't want to go down. And that whole reveal scene where he reveals that Hector is his actual grandfather is just a really good scene. So there's a lot of really good moments in this movie. And even that finale scene where he sings the song to Coco, that is a perfect scene. And it kind of becomes hard when you get into these top 12 because these top 12 are just literally those Pixar movies that are perfect in almost every way. And it just becomes a method of personal preference of which movie do I like more than others. And unfortunately, I like the top 11 more than Coco. So Coco can't make it any higher, which sucks because Coco is just a phenomenal movie. At number 11, I have Inside Out. This movie is one I was not expecting to enjoy when I first saw it either, as this movie was about the emotions of a teenage girl, which didn't seem like about a teenage girl from Minnesota who plays hockey. Something that I could not relate to in any way, but somehow this movie found a way to really make you project yourself onto Riley, as you really get to see almost everything she goes through, and you really get to see how you're kind of like her. And honestly, I am a little bit like more like Riley than I thought. Moving to a whole new town, not having any friends, not really learning, kind of having that interesting period in your life where you're not really sure who you are anymore. I've never seen that replicated in a movie before, and it was so interesting to see for once in this movie. I think the characters are really great. The cast does amazing, voicing the emotions, and overall, this movie is just a great package. If I did have to give any criticisms, I think the movie pacing wise is a little hard at first, especially once we first get out of headquarters. It feels like they didn't really have a solid plan for how they wanted to get rid of Goofball and Friendship Island, so they just kind of had to speed run through those so we can have a more and then so we can have more good things happen with hockey and the other islands. But other than that, this movie is really great, and even the scene of the memory dump is what sells it for me. This movie is great, and it is so worth it. As for a while, Pixar was really struggling with how to with movies, as a lot of theirs was not doing really great after the release of Toy Story 3. But Inside Out was really the movie that proved Pixar still has it in them to make great movies. You just needed to wait and hope for them, and that's where Inside Out lands for me. Bringing us into the top 10 is Toy Story 2. This movie is heavily regarded as the best Toy Story movie. I think there's honestly one that's a little better than it, but Toy Story 2 is a great movie. You have that whole arc where Woody is kind of having this existential crisis of being with Andy, and is it worth it going through all the wear and tear of being with a child? You have all the stuff with Jesse and Stinky Pete and Bullseye, which is fun. Buzz and his whole mission to rescue Woody. It's great. This movie is a great package that has so much in it that makes it amazing. If I did have to have any um interesting arcs, I just think that Belt Buzz is a little kind of forced into the narrative to kind of retread old ground from the original, and it just kind of feels like he doesn't have much of a role in the story. But other than that, I think this movie is flawless across the board with everything: music, characters, villains, visuals. Everything works, and that's why Toy Story 2 is heavily regarded as great. But there are other movies that are just slightly better than it, so I can't put it any higher. But still, top 10, not bad, Toy Story. At number 9 is Toy Story 3. I think over the years, I've started to enjoy this movie more and more and more. As originally, when I first saw it, I thought it was really weird to do the finale to the Toy Story trilogy is a prison escape movie set at a daycare, and Andy's going off to college and all that other stuff that kind of blends to make this movie weird on first watch. But as I've gotten older, I've loved this movie more and more, as now that I've kind of become Andy and myself as I've gone on to college, I really connect with the Andy plotline more than I used to. And the prison plotline is just an addition to that I love. As as this movie is great. And even on my most recent rewatch for it, I almost cried in the finale, in the ending scene, which has never happened to me before. So it just goes to show that this movie's risen up my list as time and time has gone on. And I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up even more because I enjoyed it really a lot on my last watch through, more than I was expecting. So who knows? Maybe in like 5 years when I do this video again and I have to rewatch all these films again, maybe this film will go higher on the list. Who knows? But as it stands, Toy Story 3 is almost a phenomenal, flawless film. Once again, the only thing that drags it down is I think making Buzz evil once again is kind of off because it kind of feels forced and it just feels like we're retreading jokes from the original. So that's the only thing that really brings this film down and keeps it out of well, any higher than spot number 9. At number 8, we have our newest Pixar film, Inside Out 2. I was not expecting to enjoy Inside Out 2 as much as the original, as the original I already held in such high regard as I connected with it so much. And when I saw the trailers for this movie, it was Riley's now a teenager, and I was worried I was not really going to be able to connect with Riley anymore. But this movie still does a great job at still making you connect with Riley and all of her different emotions. And even this time around, they do a great job of showcasing things like how anxiety works and all of the other new additions to the world building they do, and it all feels natural. In fact, Inside Out, I think, is one of the few Pixar franchises outside of Toy Story that really lends itself naturally to sequels because you could just do different stages of Riley's life and it still works. And Inside Out 2 builds to a really great finale of that whole sequence and with the anxiety attack is such a flawless scene. You got all the other things through and through. I think at times though it does feel like a retread of we got to send the emotions out of headquarters and go through the adventure. But other than that, this movie feels like a completely new piece of art, and it is honestly great from beginning to end. And I honestly loved it more than I was expecting to. So, good times Inside Out 2. You surprised me. At number 7 is Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo, I think, is an interesting category because I've mentioned a few times on this list that a couple movies have gone low because of the fact they feel too episodic. As the movie kind of has like a plot of and this happens, where we do one thing and we move to the next thing. Finding Nemo has that for a lot of things, where we have the shark, these vegetarian shark party, okay, and then we go to an anglerfish, and then we go to the EAC. It just kind of feels like at times this movie's a little episodic, but the thing that makes it different is that everything in Finding Nemo fits into the plot. As other movies just feels like they're episodic for the sake of we just need to have multiple things. Inside Out, I mean Finding Nemo, sorry, feels like it fits that mold of everything we see in the movie goes to further the story. It doesn't just feel like okay, we finished one plot line, now we're moving to another one. Everything feels like one connective thread. And then you move on to the Tank Gang, who is such a fun addition to the movie. You got Willem Dafoe in there, who is just amazing as Gil, and all the other things. The dentist is a lot of fun as a character. Finding Nemo just as a package is such a great film altogether. But it still doesn't break the top 5, unfortunately, because the top 5 are just more perfect than Finding Nemo, and it hates me to put Finding Nemo so low on the list. At number 6 is The Incredibles. This movie is another one that I think I found myself enjoying more and more as time has gone on because originally I didn't really hold it in high regard as I thought it was just another bland superhero movie. As I've gotten older, I think I've enjoyed the movie more and more because this movie is not a superhero movie. It's a family movie that just has a superhero coat of paint on it. You have some of the great moments in the scene. The characters are amazing. Syndrome is probably the best Pixar villain ever created. You have all the great visuals, the fight sequences, and the quotability. So much of this movie is hilarious comedy gold, and it's quotable, and I quote it on every single rewatch. The Incredibles is just such a flawless film that it's really hard to really put it really high, and especially the fact that it doesn't even break the top 5 just goes to show that the top 5 are just really good films. So, Incredibles, good work, but unfortunately, you did not break the top 5. Bringing us into the top 5 is Ratatouille. This is another one of those Pixar films that really is a flawless masterpiece, as everything in it, from the characters to the music to the visuals, everything about Ratatouille works and it makes the movie beautiful and amazing. I think that Ratatouille is just by far probably the best Pixar film critically, and it has everything you want from an animated movie and more. Unfortunately, I don't put it much higher than this because the top 4 films are probably my favorite animated movies of all time if I had to rank them. So Ratatouille is probably critically the best Pixar film, but when it comes to my personal favorites, the top 4 unfortunately knock Ratatouille down to be just at the start of the top 5. So, why don't we get into those top 4? At number 4 is Up. Now, Up already does so much by it swings for the fence in the first 5 minutes, and it works. The first 10 minutes is probably some of the best animation in any Pixar movie as it tells this perfect love story without even needing to say a single word. You just know. And then once we get out of that, we move into the adventure, which also is fun. I really enjoy Carl, Russell, Doug, and Kevin. They're all really fun characters. I love that the house itself almost has a personality. You got Charles Muntz, who just really goes to show as a great villain, as kind of someone who's been torn apart by their um how do I say, obsession over getting Kevin. You have all the other things of Carl learning that his wife wanted him to move on. Up is just one of the best Pixar movies ever created, as it goes so far. And even I enjoy so much more of it as, of course, I was a Boy Scout, so I obviously really connect with Russell, and everything about this movie comes together to make such a perfect package. Bringing us into the top three, taking home the bronze medal is Monsters Inc. This movie is so good. One of the big reasons for that is the main characters. So many Pixar films follow that classic mold of we have two characters who kind of are enemies or from different sides of the track who learn to be friends over the or lovers over the course of the story. Monsters Inc. flips on its head by we start the movie with Mike and Sully as the best of friends, and the movie kind of goes to test their friendship, and it really makes it believable because you really start to believe, okay, I can see where Mike is coming from, I see where Sully's coming from, it works. And then you add Randall to the mix, who is just a great villain slash rival character, and you even have Waternoose in there, which is just so interesting that they managed to pull off a really good twist villain. Because I mean, when you see all the things Randall does, it would honestly feel like a cop out to not have the CEO involved. And you have all the sequences in this movie. The Dorvald is probably one of the best final acts in any Pixar film, and Monsters Inc. is just another one of those great package films that really feel like they're doing everything right. But it just does not rate a little higher because the top two films are just a little better in my own personal eyes. Taking home the gold medal at number two, the silver medal, I should say, is Cars. I will not apologize for how high I have ranked Cars. I love this movie. Everything from the racing sequences to the message about learning to slow down and enjoy life, to the characters, to the legacy. This movie, as a collective, is one of my favorite animated movies of all time, and I know it's constantly seen as the black sheep of Pixar, but that's honestly why I like it. It feels different to not only any Pixar movie on this list, just to any animated movie in general. This movie, it just cracks that code for how to make a great animated movie, and it doesn't need to do too much to make it. If I did have any criticism for it, I do think that Chick is one of those villains that gets a little too much credit because he's not really in. So he's like missing from 95% of the movie. He's really just only in the two races, and it's more or less that the thought of him being at the race is what keeps Lightning going. You have Doc, you have so much about Cars that works. This is one of those Pixar movies I find myself turning on more than any of the other ones, apart from my part number one pick. But I will not apologize because Cars, I think, is one of the best Pixar movies, and I will totally respect your opinion if you think it is one of the lowest, because I personally love it, and I don't think that is ever going to change. But coming in at number one is still the exact same from last time, is Wally. This movie is everything I want in an animated movie and more. It's got a great environmental message, great characters, great music, great visuals. Everything comes together to make probably not only makes my favorite animated movie of all time. I love almost every frame of Wally, and it's beautiful. This movie is an easy 10 out of 10 film for me, and it easily cracks to be my number one favorite Pixar film. So there you guys have it. My ranking for all of the currently released Pixar films. If you guys remember, this list is my own personal opinion. If you guys don't agree with my list, you think some films belong lower, some films belong higher, feel free to leave your own ranking down in the comment section down below. And if you like what you see here on the channel, remember to like and subscribe because I have tons of other videos like this planned, things like reviews and other ranking lists. And I don't really have much more to say. So thank you guys all very much for watching, and I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys!